90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today we're going to provide a student and work immigration visa update, and our guest is attorney Rachel Baskin, and she's a partner with an immigration law firm of Livits, Ayass and Baskin, with offices in Rockville Centre. Welcome to Law You Should Know. We're going to try to talk about some of the common ways that someone can qualify for a visa or extend a visa for various purposes, and what are some do's and don'ts when trying to seek a visa, and how you as an immigration lawyer can be of help. So what is the current outlook in 2024 for student and work immigration visas?
Student visas, I think, have been pretty consistent for several years, truly throughout my career. In terms of student visas, really the student visas are handled mostly through universities. Universities have designated service officers, the DSOs, who assist and file and with student visa applications, which are the students are typically going to U.S. embassies across the globe in their home countries to obtain their student visas to come in. There are some embassies that one of the big things with applying for student visas, you have to be able to show an immigration officer that you do have an intention at the outset of returning home. If a consular officer, when you apply for a visa, believes that you're going to stay here, they may refuse it. Other refusal reasons over the years have also been if you have family members here and they think that you're going to live here on a permanent basis. That really hasn't changed throughout the years. Certain embassies and consulates have different policies, different quirks, but that, it changes with the times, quite frankly. In terms of the work visas, the biggest change that we've seen, and I don't sadly foresee it speeding up, is just massive slowdowns and backlogs. That's really the biggest thing that we've seen in terms of changes, and hopefully we'll see some movement and some changes there, but I'm sadly not confident that we will do.
And we're going to discuss some of those types of visas in greater detail. With the student visas, it can be for a trade school, it can be for college, it can be for Nassau Community College, but it can also be for some kind of religious program or some kind of special program or vocational program.
So student visas mostly are for, I believe that you can come for a community college. Again, most of the student visas are handled by the universities themselves. There are vocational programs. It's a different type of student visa than, say, one for a bachelor's program. You can be honest, so long as you can show that you can pay your way and you're not going to take on work, you can be on a student visa in perpetuity. You can go from a bachelor's to a master's to another bachelor's to another master's to a PhD to postdoc, etc. So you can be on a student visa forever.
And do you have to go full time? You can do a course a semester, a course a year?
There's certain hourly requirements for the student visas. So there certainly are hourly requirements, and it depends on the university and their program. So for instance, there are some student visas just for English language purposes. That's certainly not a full-time full-time load the way that a bachelor's degree is. And if you don't meet those hourly requirements, the university or school that you're attending is required to report you to the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, which can then put you in immigration proceedings.
And so you could come to the United States to study English through some kind of school.
Correct. The schools have to apply for designation to give you the visa. So if you or I wanted to open an English language school, you can't come to study at the Ken and Rachel English Language School. But if we apply for designation from from the Immigration and Customs Enforcement or ICE, you can apply for designation, and at that point, you're authorized to give out. It's called an I-20 form, so that students can come to school, and there's certain reporting requirements that you'd be required for them to stay.
And these students would not be allowed to work.
Correct.
While they're here.
Correct. Students are not allowed to work. There are some circumstances where students can work, say, on campus. Or in limited capacity. There are some circumstances where they can get some work authorization, but it's very limited while they're still in university. And that's really for people who are in bachelor's programs, maybe some vocational programs, but primarily bachelor's programs.
And what about graduate programs? Someone going for an MBA or a foreign law degree?
So you're not authorized to work during your tenure at school. But you can, not every, but if for a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a law degree, etc., you can apply for what's called optional practical training, or OPT. And it's basically a work authorization card that's given to you either for 1 year or 3 years, depending on the field that you're working in. And you can work solely in your field. And
you can earn money.
Correct.
And are there quotas on those visas as there might be for other job visas?
There's no quota on that, but you can only work in a position related to your field. So if you want to be a barista on the side, you cannot do that.
But if you were studying being a barista,
there's no student visa for a barista.
If you were going to Starbucks University, if you were going to a cooking school, a chef, a culinary arts school,
maybe.
Okay, I'm sure you could help them find their ideal job.
Maybe.
What if you were going to be a tutor and tutor in your native language, or
not permissible, because it's not connected to your field of study. So any work that you'd be doing, mostly it's like gig economy work, but any work that you'd be doing that's not directly related to your field of study really isn't something that you can take on if
you were studying law. Could you work as a paralegal or a foreign legal counselor?
You can only work, and it's really supposed to be as a training program. So it's really supposed to be for training purposes. So you can work as a law clerk, right? Lawyers aren't allowed to work as a lawyer until we're barred. Right. So you can work but it's also a year program. So it's only a year that you get that work authorization.
Could you then segue into something else that was related?
You'd have to have a separate visa to apply for that, something else that was related to your field. So potentially, yes, you can segue into something else, but it depending on your field, it can be extraordinarily difficult.
And you can get married at any time, which will increase your options.
So if you get married, so long as you entered the United States lawfully, so you didn't cross the border, you didn't, without anybody checking your documents, for lack of better words, if you entered the U.S. legally, so you came through immigration, an immigration officer asked you why you were here, and you changed your mind and you came in lawfully, and then you get married to a U.S. citizen, then yes, the process is significantly sped up. You can apply directly for your green card at that point.
And let's say you didn't get married, but can you still apply? Can you have a change of heart once you're studying after being here a certain time? Try to apply for a green card or something?
So our immigration system is a lot like our healthcare system in that you get immigration benefits, obviously with asterisks and caveats, but generally speaking, you get immigration benefits from either your employer or from your spouse. So like we just said, you can get it from your spouse, but if you don't have a spouse or another family member, a parent who can sponsor you or file an application, then you are really at the kind of the mercy of an employer who can file an application for you to get either a temporary work visa or a green card.
And also, it may take a long time if you got some kind of family visa, but you could remain in the country theoretically as opposed to waiting abroad. No, if you were a student along the way and you renewed those student visas.
Correct. Yes, if you so long as you maintained your status in the U.S. So when you enter the U.S., you tell an immigration officer what you're planning to do. You come with a student visa. You're saying I'm planning to go to school. So long as you're continuing to go to school, if you have to wait because of long processing times for your family matter, then you can continue to be in the U.S. But if you violate that status, so you work without authorization or you stop going to school for any reason, then you would have to wait at home in order to be able to get your green card.
But that's one way to wait here is
Correct.
through a student some kind of student visa.
Yes.
But
it's difficult to get the student visa if you have a U.S. family member, because remember, the embassy you're telling the officer, I'm going to go home after studying. If you have a U.S. spouse, they may not let you in.
No,
in the
but what
first
if
place.
you have a distant relative or a more distant relative?
Fair point. Then yes.
Not the spouse.
Correct.
At that point. It won't be held against you if you had U.S. relatives, except maybe a spouse.
If it's a parent, maybe it's going to depend on what the relationship is, and unfortunately, foreign nationals get penalized for the acts of other foreign nationals from that country. So if there are a lot of undocumented people or a lot of people who overstayed from a certain country, there's a higher burden to show that you're not going to overstay when you go for your visa interview.
And I just want to remind our listeners, we're talking with Rachel Baskin. She is a partner in the law firm of Livits, Ayass and Baskin, with offices in Rockville Centre. And she's an immigration lawyer, as you can tell, and she's talking about student and work immigrant visas and how they can be obtained or renewed and what the criteria are and also what the do's and don'ts are. You're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. If you missed any portion of this program or you want to tell someone else about it, just go to the podcast at nccradio.org. Let's say someone wants to come here to work. Forget about the school. You said the employer would have to obtain the permit. What would the criteria be? Of course, you and your firm are going to help them do that. But what are some of the criteria they have to meet?
So it's a little bit like alphabet soup. There's different criteria based on different jobs and different jobs and different abilities of the foreign national who are applying. Among the most common ways, or one of the easiest ways, and this is really short and quick because there is a long alphabet, but some people can come through investor options, so you can file an investor visa, and then it's quasi-employer, right? If you want to invest in our economy and we have a treaty with your country that allows you to do so, you can potentially invest in a company or a business or a startup here and almost self-sponsor yourself, but not really.
And around how much do you have to invest?
That's a great question. There is no, it's a law question, right? It depends. So it depends on the business. It has to be a reasonable amount and it has to be at risk. So if you're just going to say, great, I'm going to put $100,000 in my bank account in the U.S. and I'm going to wait until I get there, the case will be denied. You don't have to necessarily spend $100,000, but it will depend on the type of business, and you have to be able to present the immigration service and the consular officers that this is going to be a viable business and you're going to invest in the U.S. economy.
And does it have to be a brick and mortar business?
No, but it's easier if it is.
Okay. Can it be a little newsstand or a cupcake stand?
It's probably not sufficient. It has to be a substantial investment. So, it's probably not going to be something, a cupcake stand maybe. I don't know about a newsstand these days.
And can you use that as a way to bring in your brother because you need a chef or someone else who needs to be because you need someone who's bilingual?
Bilingual, probably not, but it's actually a very good way to bring in family because it is one of the few visas where your spouses can work. And these are all temporary visas. These aren't permanent green cards. These are all temporary visas. It's usually where we start.
But if everyone gets married, that opens other doors.
But you can bring in your spouse and they can work on this. It's an e-visa as the investor visa.
And the language is not enough. But if you say I need a chef who's fluent in Mandarin.
Not enough. You need a chef who can cook Mandarin food, with the investor visa,
a bilingual chef who's
bilingual in and of itself.
No,
enough.
Bilingual Mandarin specialty chef.
Maybe, but you need to have the treaty, and you need to have. It has to be somebody who's in a managerial role or essential, and they also have to be a national of your country. So if you're an Italian and you're coming in and you're making you have a bakery that you're investing in, and you want to bring in your cousin, but your cousin only has Spanish citizenship, that's not going to work. It has to be somebody who you'd be bringing in who has the same citizenship as the company does, and the company is the citizenship of the investor.
But in terms of a little business, you could open a candy store, a little grocery.
Potentially, but it's a big investment to make to be able to overcome and convince a consulate officer. Going kind of back to the beginning, that's one of the places where we are seeing backlogs in the embassies because they were closed for such a long time and they weren't really adjudicating these types of cases. That is one of the places where we are seeing significant backlogs.
Are there any other kind of skills that are popular, or someone who's going to work for a corporation, that has a skill or a degree that they can use to get a job here? So
there's two or three. One of them, which is also kind of looking at the foreign national and the business a bit. One of them that's looking at the foreign national and the business a bit more is an L visa, which is if you have a foreign company that has a foreign company abroad and a U.S. entity or subsidiary, and both companies are going to continue to operate, right? If I open, then you can potentially transfer people back and forth. And there's no real wait time and there's no quota, but there is a limit to the number of years you can be in that status, either 5 or 7, depending on what type of L visa you get. The most common visa for people in the professions, so people with a bachelor's degree or above, is the H-1B visa, and it's a lottery. There are 85,000 H-1B visas given out each year. 65 of those are allotted to people with bachelor's degrees, and 20,000 of those are allotted to people with U.S. master's degrees. So the idea of that 20,000 was we're educating U.S. students here. We're going to increase the number of master's H-1Bs that we give. The lottery opens in the end of March, so employers who are considering filing have to make those decisions for February, March time. If you're selected, and then there's a lottery because there's, like I said, 85,000, and with 85,000, immigration gets upwards of hundreds of thousands.
And it's the employer who who win the lottery for an opening. It's not people who apply for it.
It is the employer who wins the lottery, but the employer is required to name the beneficiary. So the employer can't say, well, we want to try, we'll find someone, it'll be fine. The employer has to name a specific beneficiary who they're going to file that H-1B for.
And is there any way they can maximize the odds, filing it in Anchorage, Alaska, or, the heartlands?
It's the only, and this immigration has kind of keen on this now, and there are proposed new H-1B regulations that may address this, but until regulations become the law, they're just proposed. But the way the H-1B regulations are written it's employer specific. So for instance, if you have 3 different entities, potentially each entity can file the H-1B, enter in the H-1B lottery. The biggest risk of doing that is when you're entering the H-1B lottery, you're telling the Immigration Service, I'm going to file this petition. So it's not I'm entering it, we'll see. So, and if you don't file the petition, you have to have a good reason why you didn't. And saying, well, I tried to scam the system to increase my chances isn't really a good system, and that isn't a good enough reason. And you could be potentially in a circumstance where they will forbid you from filing H-1Bs in the future for fraud. Okay. So it is there. That's kind of the check that's supposed to be. There has been, given all of the increase in H-1Bs entered, there's definitely some sort. It's not perfect.
There's a lot of attention on H-1Bs. Are there any backdoor options? Let's use the model analogy. It's a more subjective thing, but if a company needed a model, a hand model, a model, they just say we need this person to be our model. They exemplify our product,
So interestingly, we do a lot of cases for people in the arts.
Or it could be a unique artist.
Right. So in the H-1B context, I tell clients this all the time because some of our clients are on the cusp. A graphic designer is an excellent example of this, right? You can get a degree in graphic design, or you can be an artist.
Until AI takes it over.
No, there's still value in the arts. We're still going to value our arts here. But for the H-1B is focusing on the employer and the job duties and and whether or not the person has a specific degree. In the arts, and science, this applies in sciences as well, and business and athletics. But you have to be, the Immigration Service then focuses on the individual. What does the individual have? and do they meet certain criteria to show they're called what's an alien of extraordinary ability. That's the terminology that was written in the 50s in the law, so that's the terminology that's
they're not competing against anyone else. You just have to get through the uniqueness hurdle.
Correct.
Or ability hurdle.
Correct. You have to be able to show that you have either earned distinction in your field if you're working in the arts, or you have to be able to show that you are at the top of your field if you're in an industry such as business or science. So, for instance, doctors who have published their work, who have presented at conferences, who have their work cited, may be eligible for this O1 visa, and that's a way to circumvent the H-1B process.
So anyone, a business person, if they presented at conferences, maybe in other places, maybe even in the U.S., that might help build their portfolio to qualify.
Correct. So if you can show how you meet the criteria for the O1, it's the O1 visa, then you can qualify. So it's not necessarily industry specific. It's showing in your field how do you meet at least 3 of the enumerated criteria. One of my favorite O1s that I did, or most unique, is for a funeral home director. And I was able to show how she rose to the level of being the top of her field to get an O1 visa.
And I believe Nassau Community has a funeral director program. So how would someone like a funeral director do that?
So I think that it's showing how you've managed things. So you have to. So there's 7-ish criteria, and you have to meet at least 3.
And does the employer have to show they need you, or
nope?
So you qualify. Do you have to have a job to get the visa or potential job? Okay,
you have to have a job for all of the categories. You have to have a job. In the O1 context, in the arts at least, it's a bit more flexible. So in the arts, you can be able to show that you have to have a job, and you can't say, I'm going to look for work. But you have to be able to show that you have jobs lined up, and you're going to work for multiple or with multiple employers. For the O1 in business and science, you really do have to have a job with one specific employer. We have been successful with companies where the foreign national sets up their own company and is working for themselves, so long as they're able to show that they have work that they're going to be doing.
And what if you were a film director or going to make a documentary or do something with the media?
We do that regularly. So as long as you can, so there's you
don't have to have an employer. You just have to.
Well, you have to have contracts to show that you're working on those things.
Okay.
So being an independent filmmaker who's self-funded is virtually impossible. You have to be able to show you have a producer or somebody who's lined up with the project as well.
They're giving you a grant.
Sure.
Could it be a relative or a friend, or they don't look that closely at it?
They really, for the O1s, they're really focused on the individual themselves and not so much on the business. Obviously, it has to be something that's valid. It has to be something that's real and something that you're going to be doing. But they want to know that you're extraordinary. You've risen to the level that you've earned distinction. You have awards in your field. You have press about your work.
You have followers on the internet.
It depends. The Immigration Service is actually really behind in the internet age. They don't always like internet articles or online posts.
And you have to do more than post on LinkedIn.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to remind our listeners, we're talking with attorney Rachel Baskin. She's an immigration attorney, and she's with the firm of Livits, Ayass and Baskin in Rockville Centre. And just tell us about your website and some of the information that listeners can find on your website.
So our website is www.lab.pllc.com. And we really just have an outline of what our services are, what the work that my partner and I really focus on. We do a lot of work, like I was mentioning, in the arts and a lot of those O1 visas and H-1B visas as well. We also, then transition our clients to green cards when they're ready to make that move to do so. We also feature our accomplishments on the page, certainly where we've given talks and speaking engagements as well as any publications.
And people will see in the variety of situations where you can help people.
Correct.
Fulfill their dream and maybe fill their wallet, if nothing else. What are some don'ts as far as, and I just want to remind our listeners that if you've missed any portion of the podcast, you want to hear it again, just go to nccradio.org. And you're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. What are some don'ts in terms of coming to the U.S., applying for visas, try to, maximize your chances of staying here and perhaps getting a green card or citizenship?
So the biggest don't is don't lie. Don't tell an immigration officer either at the consulate or when you come through at the airport or at an immigration interview on an immigration application, either that you're filing at the consulate or here. Don't lie. Don't be honest in what you're telling an immigration officer, because they keep those records, and while you may not remember what you've put on them, they will look at them. So be truthful and forthcoming. And then once you're in the United States, don't violate the terms of your status, because doing something that you're not allowed to do could have really serious consequences, so that you won't be able to get benefits in the future.
And also, don't commit a crime.
Correct.
But
that's just generally.
but you're not going to get deported or lose your status. If you're a citizen, it might be a slap on the wrist, but there can be consequences and obstacles if you're trying to successfully immigrate.
So and also, if you have committed a crime that abroad, be forthcoming about that. Back to
Yes, the lawyer might be able to explain it or work it out, but you don't want to lie about it. And lastly, also, you want to pay taxes. If you have income and you have to pay taxes, don't avoid that.
So if you have income, speak with an accountant, because there are certain tax rules and tax treaties that apply for foreign nationals. I always defer to the accountants when it comes to taxes. If you're working in the United States, generally there are tax obligations. Certainly there are some visas where the tax obligations are different than others. Similarly, if you own an entity here, then there are different obligations as well.
But it's a way of showing you're law-abiding, and you don't want to break any law because you want to grow your immigration status or renew it. You don't want these obstacles.
So interestingly enough, you should pay your taxes. I want that to be very clear. But when you're filing for renewals for the temporary work visas, and even in some employment-based cases, immigration doesn't ask you to show your taxes. They can absolutely ask you. We always tell our clients that immigration can ask you for tax documentation, especially in the green card context, but it's not a requirement that you're forthcoming with them.
At some point, just the documentation might be important, just so you've been a law-abiding person and et cetera?
Maybe. It may not come up on it. In some instances, there may not be a instance where you have to show them. That being said, if you are requested to show them, and immigration can certainly request them either at the green card stage or at the naturalization stage, if there are any issues, it's a lot more complicated and certainly more costly to address those issues at those stages than it would be if you had handled it at the first instance.
Rachel, can you just give us your website again, which, as you said, provide some further information about these issues and shows how you and your firm have been able to help people in these situations?
Sure. It's www.lab-pllc.com.
I'd like to thank our guest, attorney Rachel Baskin, immigration attorney with the firm of Livits, Ayass and Baskin, with offices in Rockville Centre. And if you missed any portion of the program or you want to tell someone else about it, just go to the podcast at nccradio.org. Please remember, whatever you've heard is presented as information only. You must get your legal advice from an attorney reviewing the exact circumstances of your case or situation. And please join us next week at this time on Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York.